This is Brian Selznick, who is a very famous American illustrator. We're going to talk a little bit about his background, his life, his training first, and then we'll get into his books, which I think are going to be very familiar to you. Selznick was born in New Jersey. He always loved to draw from the time he was little. He was drawing all the time. But he didn't really want to be a children's book illustrator. He wanted to be an artist of some kind. So he went to the Rhode Island School of Design. This is a very famous art school, and a lot of illustrators went there, including Chris Van Allsburg. If you remember Van Allsburg from The Polar Express and Jumanji, for example, he was at the Rhode Island School of Design as well. Selznick graduated in 1988 and didn't know quite what to do. He went to work for a children's bookstore, a very famous children's bookstore in New York City called Eeyores. And what he did there, besides working in the bookstore itself, was he painted all the displays on the windows. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a display that he painted during baseball season. So they had a big display of baseball books in the windows. While he was there, he got to meet a lot of children's book authors and illustrators who would come to the bookstore to sign books. And when they saw his artwork, they really encouraged him to try his hand at illustration. Um, so he decided to pursue a project that he had really worked on and liked since he was at the Rhode Island School of Design. For one of his class projects there, he had to do a piece of artwork relating to Houdini, Harry Houdini, the famous magician and escape artist. And he was always fascinated with magic and with Houdini. So when he thought of illustrating his first book, writing his first book, he thought, why not do it on Houdini? So this is his first book. He wrote and illustrated it in 1991. It's called The Houdini Box, and it's considered historical fiction in that there is a core to the story that's true. Houdini really did exist. He did do all these magic tricks. He did die and supposedly leave all the secrets to his tricks in a box. And Selznick took that story and incorporated this young man into the story, Victor. Uh, in this book, he did the illustrations in several ways. He worked with acrylics, that's a kind of paint. He works with colored pencils, but mostly he works with graphite and pen. You're probably going to recognize his black and white illustrations most of all. Selznick then went on to illustrate for many other people. I listed some of the titles here that I thought you would be familiar with. In the fiction genre, in the chapter books, he did the cover for Frindle for Andrew Clements. He did the cover for Riding Freedom by Pan Munoz Ryan, and also all the Doll People books by Anne Martin. He also worked in historical fiction and biography, just like the Houdini book. Amelia and Eleanor Go for a Ride. That is a picture book which has to do with uh, one night when Amelia Earhart took Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady of the United States, up in her plane for a plane ride. So you can find that in the picture book section. The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins, he actually won a Caldecott Medal honor for him. We're going to see some pictures from that in a second. Just stunningly beautiful acrylic paintings. When Marion Sang, about an opera singer, and finally Walt Whitman. Now, where can you find these books? Let me see if I can increase this a little bit. There you go. The fiction books, of course, are all in the fiction section, but then the letters where they would be are the first three letters of the author's last name. So, for example, Frindle would be in Fick and then CLE for Clemens. Doll People would be in Fick, MAR for Martin. That's pretty simple. Same with the historical fiction. Now, the biographies are different because biographies are true. They're going to be against the wall on the other side opposite the windows. And they all have 921s on them. and then the first three letters of the person's name that the book is about. So here's Frindle. This is the very famous cover of Frindle, if you've ever seen it. Remember, Frindle is a pen, if you haven't read it. Uh, he talked about, when I saw him, about how many revisions he did for this cover. Now, this is Selznick speaking, and if you can see to the right part of the slide, he has all these little pictures of all different covers that he did for Frindle. And the one that he actually ended up submitting to his editor is the one furthest to the right over here where the boy looks like he's holding the pen in the air. And actually, when he showed it to us in color, it was actually a pretty cool cover. But when the editor saw it, she said it needed to be more in your face. It had to be bolder than what it was. So what he did was he made the pen the focal point of the cover, because actually it is called Frindle. It's about the pen. So you can see the final cover on the left-hand side. That is, again, done in acrylics. It's like a thicker kind of paint. Someone asked him whether he ever works in watercolor, and he said, no, it's just too messy. And he finds that there's no room for error when he works in watercolor. This is the dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. So let me lift this up a little bit so you can see it. There we go. Now, on the left-hand side, oh, let me go back a minute. If you don't know the story, Waterhouse Hawkins was a real person who lived in England and was the first person who ever made models of dinosaurs. He looked at the bones and the fossils that scientists were finding, and he envisioned what the dinosaur would actually look like, what its full body would look like. He made sketches and then he built models, mostly out of brick and mortar and steel, huge models in England. And Selznick did a lot of research on Hawkins. So he went to England, and in the newspapers from the 1880s, he found this sketch, the sketch you see to the left. In order for Hawkins to sell his idea of putting dinosaur models in a museum, he had all these very wealthy patrons come to a big banquet dinner. And this is actually a sketch that was in the newspaper of everyone at the dinner. He built this huge dinosaur model and had them sit inside it and eat dinner. So if you look on the right-hand side, you're going to see the painting that Selznick did based on that drawing. So you can see it looks almost exactly the same. I thought it did anyway. It's pretty impressive. When you see it in real life, the painting is probably only 16 to 18 inches wide, I think, probably by about 10 to 12 high. It's not very big. I've seen a lot of artwork for books, and a lot of times they're huge paintings. Paul Zelinsky, for example, who did Rapunzel and Rumpelstiltskin, huge, really tall paintings, but these were very small. On the bottom of the screen, now I'll move this down, you're going to see the actual dinosaurs. Those still exist in England, and Selznick was privileged to go out to this island where they reside and see the dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. If you've read the story, you know that Mr. Hawkins actually came to the United States to build a dinosaur museum and was building models to go in New York City, but the political atmosphere was so corrupt in New York City that a lot of people were upset that money from the city was going to a dinosaur museum. So thugs actually came into his workshop at night and smashed all the dinosaurs. And to this day, they think that the pieces of those dinosaurs are buried in Central Park. Take a look at that book and those illustrations. They're really, really cool. He hits it big finally on his own with a book he wrote and illustrated called The Invention of Hugo Cabret. And these illustrations are actually really small when you see them in real life. I would say they're probably 6 inches wide by about 4 inches tall. They look the size of a photograph, really. He had drawn them all in graphite, or what you and I would call pencil. Um, and then they're enlarged to go into the book. He did extensive research here on the animatronics, the robots that were in here, and he actually went to Paris and studied the train station, so he knew what the train station should look like as well. This book won the Caldecott Medal in 2008. Now, we haven't talked a lot about the Caldecott Medal yet, but it's for an American illustrator for original work, and the work has to help tell the story. Uh, it's unusual that he won the Caldecott Medal because usually a picture book wins because it's for the pictures. This is one of the few times that a chapter book has won the Caldecott Medal because of the extensive, most beautiful, detailed illustrations. And you may have seen the movie that was made from this book, Hugo. He was an advisor on the movie and traveled to the site where they were filming it so he could advise the director, and everyone involved in the movie had a copy of the book. Uh, if you've seen the movie, you know a lot of those scenes look exactly like his illustrations, which is pretty cool because that's rare for a movie to be just like the book. This is Wonderstruck. Wonderstruck was his next book. It's not included at the exhibit at the Delaware Art Museum right now, uh, but he talked about it a lot. And in this book, the story is told in text from one character's perspective, and then it goes 50 years back to tell the story from another character's perspective, but only in illustration. So it's a very quiet, silent world. If you know the book, the girl in it is deaf, so there are no words. It's just pictures. It's what she sees. Again, the pictures were done in graphite pencil. They're really small, and he did a lot of research. It ends up in a museum in New York City, and he went and visited that museum, actually went behind the scenes so he could see what things were like there. Great book. If you haven't read it, awesome, awesome book. Again, his books that he wrote are in Fick, first three letters of his last name, S-E-L. So right now there's this great exhibit at the Delaware Art Museum. You need to go see this if you possibly can. It's not often that you get to see original artwork from books. This exhibit, it's one of its last stops. It's over 100 pieces of his original artwork, his paintings and his drawings. It's called From Houdini to Hugo, so it goes from Houdini box all the way to Hugo, but doesn't include Wonderstruck. He also talked about, while he was here, that he's working on a new book. He was actually writing it the night before when he was at the Hotel DuPont staying. He said it's going to be another large book like Wonderstruck and Hugo, and it takes place over a span of 300 years. But he wouldn't reveal the subject of the book. He said it will be out next fall, so that should be pretty interesting.